Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Birth Neoterist space. Listen, real life of working from home, looking at my dogs, like, are you about to act out? Um, I am your host, Sabia, and I have a very sweet, so sweet, such a sweet person, Andrea Richardson, and we're going to be talking about some fun stuff today. And I'm super excited because yeah, Andrea has a lot to give in this conversation about like BDSM and being Black in this space and pleasure. Like you are building yourself up to definitely be one of the main people in our space, especially with the intersections that you have to talk about this work. So can you introduce yourself and however feels comfortable for you today?
Sure. I'm a full spectrum doula here based in St. Louis. I care a great deal, mad passionate about Black birth, Black pleasure, Black loss, as far as it relates to pregnancy and infant loss, abortion support, death support. I'm also a Reiki practitioner, and I love the pleasures. Yeah, as a pleasure doula too. So I give a damn about a lot of shit.
So can you tell us about your recent experience,
Oh
the work that
yeah.
you just did in Atlanta?
Oh yeah. First time in Atlanta. First time at Sex Down South conference. First time speaking at the conference. I did a workshop called Pleasure Mapping for Everyday Embody. Talking to a lot of folks, sex workers, sex educators, sex therapists about pleasure mapping and the benefits of it, um, and how to prioritize pleasure every damn day of your life. So it was a lot of fun.
That part, the yes, pleasure every day. And I think that's something I'm like working on. Like, even when I have like these long work days, I'm like, where can I put pleasure in somewhere? Like, can I eat my favorite thing or move anywhere, go outside or paint my nails? Like, what can I do? Because the days be long and the days sometimes be stressful, but it's like, I don't know, I feel like part of my liberation practice is to always like keep some type of like, there's goodness happening, right?
Mhm.
Like sometimes I have to create it. Sometimes it's obvious, right? Like, but then it's also sometimes where I have to just create it for myself. So one of the things that we have in common is our interest in BDSM. And so I would love to hear about how you got into BDSM.
Okay, it's a lovely story. It is. So, um, my first love and I, we dated as teenagers, and then we also dated actually in our mid-20s. Um, he introduced me to a lot of shit. So
Hmm.
like a lot of cam work, which was really fun. Um, he actually tied me up once. He was learning at a dungeon in Chicago. So he tied me up. We did a little impact play, a little sensory deprivation. We even played around with the idea of being in a kind of dumb sub dynamic.
Hmm.
It was whisked away. It was whisked away. Because I don't think we had the capacity to go from like Chicago to St. Louis a lot or often. But that should change my life. I know that that was a long ass time ago. It was about maybe 15 years ago. It's a long time. Um, but it really, I trusted that man with my life. I still do. We're very good friends. And I think that he made me feel really safe to really explore that. I trusted him. I knew his family.
Hmm.
Like our families are really close. And he just got me into a lot of different things like that, which were already inside of me. I'm already like, I've set some sad placements about the
I'm
event.
like super saggy, and I'm like, is that like connected? Like, I have so many sag placements. So I'm all about like playing with power, understanding power, and like doing these things. So I'm like, yeah, I get that. But also one of the things that you said that I think is really important to talk about when we talk about BDSM, like I think people see like 50 Shades of Grey, right? Like,
Mhm.
or whatever, right? That might be their introduction to this space, but a lot of BDSM is really created in a trusting relationship over time, right? Like like you said, like we had established a relationship. I had, learned to trust him in different ways. Like it wasn't like I just meet you, you do this thing, and we and like we just go and do it like in an unsafe type of way. Like there's also like a foundation of trust that is needed in these dynamics.
I know that because we had a relationship, because I trusted him, he actually knew that I was queer and that I was curious. And so it just made me feel really safe to like try these things with him. And I knew his family. I knew he was gonna hurt me because I knew his family. And we just had a lot of conversations. And because I trusted him so much and because he built this relationship on like liberation, it was really easy to kind of fall into like this sweet subby
Hmm.
dynamic. It was really nice.
I love that. So, okay. So I'm thinking back to like when I got into the space, right? And I got into the space from like one of my friends was submissive, and I was like, girl, what? Like I couldn't understand. I was like, why are you doing this for this person? Like I can't, huh? Like it was, but
Hmm.
then I met her dom because she was like, you and a dom, like she was like, you and my dom are very similar. And I was like, what does that mean? So I met her dom, and then I saw the whole like the full picture, not just from the submissive side. I saw from the dom side as well, and I saw it together, and I was like, oh, okay. I was like, okay, now this makes sense to me, but it couldn't make sense to me from like initially when I first started like seeing her on that side. And now, like, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but I think it's pretty obvious that I, like, I mainly see myself as a dominant in this space. But one of the things that I want to say, and I want to like see if you had a similar situation. So I was introduced to BDSM in a very like queer, black kind of space, right? But then when I started to like do more like exploring and wanted to get into the community, I quickly realized that how I had been introduced was not, at least in my circumstance, was not the majority.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
right? Like as I started to go into like more spaces, wanting to build more community, wanting to learn more skills, wanting to like do these things, I would be like, oh, I am now in very white spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, initially I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'll be in this white space, whatever the case may be. But then it was like, it's also different to be purposely playing with power
Hmm.
in predominantly white spaces on either side, whether you're dom, submissive, if you're just black in these spaces. And like, I just remember certain situations where I'm almost in Massachusetts, and I was like, yeah, like I'm a, get into the community, and the community was super white. And I went to some events, and I remember just feeling like levels of discomfort because it was like yes, there's like this playing with power that's happening, but also there's a clear privilege that is happening even in the BDSM community of you just being here, of you being able to be in these spaces, for you to be open, for you to have resource, for you to like, you know what I'm saying? So I would love
Hmm.
like your experience with that has been.
Yeah, my introduction to BDSM actually was from my partner who's Black. And I know that during the Panini Press, during the pandemic, I had been making a lot of new friends from a Black kink group on Clubhouse. And it was just Black and brown folks. Um, and it kind of helped me develop the idea that I don't play with where I identified people, especially knowing my lineage. Like um, I know that like master slave is not for me, especially like knowing the family that owned
Mm-hmm.
my people. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
never. But through Clubhouse, I was in this group called the King Lounge.
Hello, Kitty.
Um, like, hey,
I'm
family.
happy that we both have our animals. My dogs are doing a
Yeah.
thing. Your cat.
Mm. The King Lounge, which was phenomenal. Learning from Black doms and houses and actual houses, electroplay, learning about what are kink versus fetishes. Um, I actually experienced my first dungeon experience, and it was led by A woman who is Black, Jax, lives in DC, who's like heading
Hmm.
up DC Cuddle.
Hmm.
Um, so I actually, yeah, I've never played, and I'm on FetLife too. On my
Hmm.
description, on my profile, it says that I don't play with Y-identified people, period. I don't care if you're cis, I don't care if you're trans, I don't care if you're non-binary, but Y-identified people, I don't like.
Yeah, because it's like it's always like I've definitely played with different like races and things like that, but it's like even in the times that I've been the dominant and a white person has been the submissive, there's always a level of something there, right? That like either we need to talk about it. Well, in my sense, we're gonna talk about it. We're not gonna leave it unnamed, right? But like we have to talk about that this is not socially, this is not how this works, right? So like also like is a part of your place in this dynamic out of a fetishization of me, right? Of like having that awareness around like this is not usually it. So I can play with this and I can have choice in how I play with this, right? Where like in my everyday life, I don't have choice around how my blackness is valued in society. So it's just like it's so much complication to it that
Yes,
like, yeah, I would just love your thoughts.
I should have been. I I think that so I can avoid all of that. I'm not playing with y'all. And I
Hmm.
feel like also too, because I've met this big group of Black Kinksters, I'm like, the universe knows where to guide me to Black ass kink spaces.
Hmm.
I just want to be able to heal. Like, I don't want kink to be under the system. I know that there's so many, most of the dungeons and spaces are white, but now that I know that there are Black ass spaces for Kingsters to live, like, and to be and to play, that's where I want to be, period.
Hmm.
I don't want to be in a dynamic. I don't want you to spank me. I will take in your books though. I will like
Hmm.
learn, but I will not be in a space with white identified Kingsters if I can help it.
Yeah. No, I think
Because
that's a
it's
real
part of my
thing.
mental self-care, a part of my complete pleasure, a part of my liberation, I think, as a Black human.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, unless they like are paying me, I think, for services maybe, and I'm the dom and I'm in control. Like
Hmm.
that's the only dynamic
Yeah.
I
And I think like that's the thing. Like one of the things that like the things important even especially now, like when I first started getting into kink around my early 20s, in like 2021, I wasn't as aware of my own history. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't aware of my own history. Like I didn't become like a doula till 20, 27, 28. Like, 20, 24, 20, I was like doing my like starting to read my Malcolm X's and my this and my that, right? But like in my beginning, I wasn't aware of my history. So I didn't really have the words for like what I felt was present,
Mhm.
right? When I was like interacting with white folks in kink spaces. And now I do have that awareness in it, like obviously I'm selective about who I may deal with in that space. But it's also important, like I think for white folks in the space to know your history. Like, yes, we're coming here to have fun, we're here to play with power, we're here, but you can't, it's not healthy to come into, I feel like it's unsafe, or literally creates this level of unsafety if you don't do your understanding of like what is going on in the world, what are the power dynamics that are happening in social spaces, right? And how does that interact with what we do in these kink spaces? Like, because they're not separate, right?
Yeah,
Like, you don't just come into the kink space and be like, oh, we just cut off the world and none of that stuff out there matters. Like, no, it's brought into this space, right? So whether you said like we may not be in a dynamic, but we might be sharing space somewhere else, like you need to know your history or
yeah.
our history, I would say, right? So like I would also love for you to talk about specifically being a Black kinkster, like when you say healing, what healing does kink provide for you personally?
As a person who has anxiety, the fact that I can be in a scene or enter into a dynamic where I can vet, we're both vetting together, negotiating, it makes me feel like, yes, we both are on the same page and I can be in control of my, and as a survivor too,
Hmm.
be in control of my experience, and we can co-create this experience together. Like that is healing of my anxiety. That is healing to me as a person who is a survivor SA. Um, another like just I know that for me in bondage especially, it it takes a lot to be able to like kind of surrender or trust that this experience is for me, and like all of that bondage stuff is really healing of my physical body, because I know that I can control it through the the light system, red, yellow and
Hmm.
green. I can control the movement in my body, and I can control the sensations in my body, like um that is like super healing to me. Having conversations and like being able to communicate with like my prospective daddy about like what I do love, what I don't love, it's just really healing psychologically to and it's helping me heal my throat chakra, I think, too, and just the way
Hmm.
I communicate. Like in the past I've been really nervous about like not having my needs met, or like asking for what I need and them not being met. But like kink is a really great space for me to really voice those things. And to me, that's kind of healing my past and healing my communication and healing my throat chakra and my root chakra too. Um, so like physically, psychologically, I think even spiritually, like there's just
That's
something
for
like
sure. A
really
thousand percent.
dynamic about that shit,
And I think there's
about
even something like ancestral about like, like being Black femmes, like being able to be like, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. When they talk about like ancestral, like, you know, people in our lineage being assaulted, not having any say so about what they can do, what they can't do, what the value of their body is, right? Like one thing that I know, like for me, that's been helpful in kink is like there's such a level of like acceptance in kink that is not even when it comes to beauty or standards of beauty and all that kind of stuff, it just doesn't it's not that it doesn't exist in kink because it's there, but it's like so much more expensive,
yeah.
right? Like there isn't like this cookie cutter. It's like there's so many different types of bodies, different types of people, different types of whatever that is not like, oh, this is acceptable. It's like, no, I'm gonna be cared for and honored in the body that I'm in. I don't need
Mhm.
to improve it. I don't need to change it. I don't need to shift it. Who I am in this moment is enough to be cared for, to be adored, to be loved on, to be, you know what I mean? To have pleasure. Like that to me has always been like a part of kink that I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And especially for Black people, like I don't know about you, but I always like recommend. I'm like, listen, you don't have to be the freak. 'Cause people think like you go to kink and you gotta like want the freakiest things to happen. And I'm
Mhm.
like, you don't even have to go, you don't even gotta be that freaky. It don't even gotta be that. But like it can be
Yeah, can.
if you want to go there, but it doesn't have to be, right? But I'm like, I think it's something so powerful, especially for Black people, to play with power intentionally
Hmm. Hmm.
on either side of it. Like I think there's something so powerful about someone being submissive,
Hmm.
right? And then I also there's something so powerful about somebody being dominant, but to let yourself be in either lane and to be taken care of, or to do the caring, or to receive, or like whatever the cycle is for you and that other person. I think that's so healing for Black people because we don't get to do that on a regular basis.
We don't. We don't. And that makes it sacred. It's such a sanctity, sanctified. I love that word. There's something
Hmm.
about that. Most definitely. And I identify as a switch. Don't let the
Hmm.
sweetness feel.
Oh no,
I'm
I know I'm
giving off
not.
goddess mommy energy. Like, ooh. And I really am. Yeah, I've been really exploring that about myself lately. especially goddess. I've always been goddess energy. I remember talking with one of my love interests in the height of the panini press, and I was like, I just want my future partner to like worship me. And he's like, what does that mean to you? And I was like, I don't quite know what that means. And then I took the alpha sexual test as like
Hmm.
98% goddess. I'm like, that's right. That's right. That's
No, that's me all the way. Like my girlfriend is like, when I first started to get into kink, that was like I used to like definitely be like goddess Marley, I think I was or something. And I definitely am the type where in relationship, I'm like, are you gonna like tell me how great I am every day? Or like what are we doing? Like are you
exactly.
gonna like my love language is acts of service? Like what are we doing? Like, but I think like, right, like Cake has given me the language to understand what these parts of me, right? Like, okay, my love language is acts of service, and what does that actually mean? Right. And then also what I think Kink also has established for me, how do I also give back? Right? Because my love language should be acts of service, but through conversation, through whatever, it's like how do I also give back to this person? Not in a way that I think I should be giving back, but in a way that
Right.
actually is in touch with what they actually need from me.
Clear.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Mm, yeah, for sure. Folks
So another
need
question I have for you. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
some folks need different things, and as partners or friends or situationships, we ought to really dig into that.
And it's
Ought to,
actually pretty fun because it's also good to like, I feel like even if you learn something about your partner and like the way that they need to receive care or whatever, like your dynamic, whatever, it makes you feel good to be able to give that to them. Like when you see that response, you're like, okay, cool. Like, like we both did something good for each other. I learned, you're receiving, and like that is just like cyclical, right? It's gonna give, it's gonna take, it's gonna move around. And so when you think about BDSM, especially in regards to Blackness, what do you want the future of that to look like?
I think first I would love for this idea that kink is for white folks to like ease up, to like completely ease up. Because when people think about kink, they do think of
Hmm.
50
For
Shades.
sure.
They think, oh, that's some white people shit. I would really like people to
For
like
real.
ease up on that, because it is for us, and it's a practice of liberation for us. Ooh, and it's that would be first. I would love to see more Black-owned dungeons in the US, like just popping up like wildfires. I would really love that. So that we can feel safe in spaces, um, to get, even more pleasure, even more liberation.
Hmm.
I would love in the future, hmm, those are the things that I could really think about. Maybe also hmm, a lot of the practices like consent and to really start creeping outside of the kink world and start like bleeding into our relationship
Hmm.
and our
Hmm.
work and all that. So I think that Kingsters, we got it good, when it comes to like educating about consent and pleasure. I want like those things to kind of bleed into our everyday lives.
That
Um,
part.
and yeah, I would really like, I think white Kingsters to like take a step down and like make more space for Black Kingsters to like
Hmm.
really run through so we can, yeah, I would, but more black and brown dungeons. I don't know. I don't even.
Yeah. And that part too, what you said about like consent being something that spreads beyond the kink space. Like, I think having that like early education at like 20 years old when I was like a spring chicken really helped guide me, right? Like, even before I knew I was going to be a doula, even though before I knew I was going to be like the boss, I didn't, you know what I mean? Like, that foundation of understanding power, it makes me so aware of how what my position, depending on where I'm at, how that plays into the situation that I'm in, and
Hmm.
how important it is for me to decrease, right? To like give space, right? In a way that like even the way that I doula, right? Even for you, the way that you doula, the way that you show up in those spaces, like a lot of that when you come from a kink background, that shit just flows over.
It does.
Like it just becomes a part of the way you exist in your relationships and the way that you work and the way because you can't once you know about how to do that in a way that is spacious, that is safe, that is helpful to the to yourself and the people around you, you can't turn it off.
Hmm.
But you also notice how other people have no awareness. You're
No, they
like,
don't.
hello? And I'm like, oh, okay, they didn't learn this, so they weren't in the kink space, I guess. Like, okay. But I have one more question for you before we exit our time together is with all of this and with you being doing the work that you're doing, exploring pleasure and bringing pleasure to other people, how are you taking care of yourself?
Um, I definitely am taking time to sometimes care, like at the conference, for example, sometimes care look like going to bed at 11 o'clock, like leaving the space, going to bed, um, putting my phone on do not disturb, especially on Mondays on my days off. Solo time means self-care. I'm taking care of my emotional, my sexual care. Um, Also asking for what I need. I've been a begging ass person for like 2 months now, and that's been really helpful to like take care of of my needs, really. But
Hmm.
what else have I been really doing lately? Hydrating. That's been taking
Hmm.
care of my just organs. Sometimes we forget about that shit. I love to
Hmm.
sing. It's taking care of my spiritual self-care, my emotional self-care, taking queen's baths, my that's my sexual and spiritual self-care. So I've been doing, yeah.
Doing the things. And this is why we come to you for understanding what we can do for ourselves. Because I'm like, dang, you name all these things, like my spiritual self, my this. I'm like, okay, bet. Let me do a little bit more of that. So how do we reach you?
Oh, yes. You can email me, y'all, because I love to get a good email at Andrea at wombcarewoman.com. Woman is spelled WOMXN.com. You can always text me or call me on my business line, which is 314 669 5182, or check out me on the Instagrams. So my Pleasure Doula page is at Sensual Sweet Coaching. Yeah, you guys can reach me that way.
For sure. We'll put all that information. If there's anything else you want us to add to like our description of this episode, send it over. If you have any offerings that you want people to know about, send it over. But of course, I'm more than gracious. Wait, more than I have more gratitude. My brain is okay. I have so much gratitude for our time together and for your energy. Because anytime I talk to you, I'm like, it's like velvet. I'm like, yeah, cool.
It's
But
all of
yes.
water signs.
And but thank you so much, and we will talk soon.
Later.
Later.